Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is episode 306 of Milwaukee's Tailgate Brewers podcast, part of the MKE Tailgate Network. I'm James, joined by Ryan and Paul after we took a week off to, I guess, maybe more in the Brewers playoff elimination, and a lot's happened since then, so we'll get you all caught up. But first of all, how are you guys doing on this fine Sunday morning, Paul?
I'm tired and haven't had coffee yet. That's how I'm doing. I went to a party with friends to Michigan friends to watch the game last night, and had my kids up too late, and that's how we're rolling this morning. So.
Yeah, I was at Widespread Panic the last 2 nights in downtown Milwaukee, so feel a lot better today than I did yesterday. I'll say that much. There was also up yesterday early to watch Liverpool beat Everton. So yeah, but my morning drink is Alka-Seltzer. So. Old man.
Jeez, we're in rough shape. We're in rough shape this morning, yeah, as we do this. But just wanted to get everybody kind of caught up on a couple of things that happened as pretty much as soon as we decided we were going to skip last week. Some news came out because that's the way of the world. So we'll talk about Brandon Woodruff, the latest on the Craig Counsell stuff. Still with the Brewers for at least the next 10 or so days. We'll see how that turns out. And we got some other questions too. But before we get started, a reminder, you can become my patron at patreon.com/MKE Tailgate. $2 a month guarantees you get your questions answered both here on this podcast and on Paul's reporting as eligible Packers pod. $5 gets you the question priority plus the additional exclusive content. That includes the Minor League Extra with Ryan and James Anderson from RotoWire and Paul's Packers mini pods, where he'll tell you things like how the Packers could possibly lose to the Denver Broncos. We'll see that.
Yeah, big on that this week.
Yeah, I kind of listened to the last couple of episodes you guys did, and you seem to be kind of talking yourself into, well, this could be bad. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yep.
They're kind of unpredictable at this point.
They are. So. They have, Aaron always provided them kind of a floor where you could work off of, and there's no floor or ceiling here. It could be all over the map. So harder to predict, but at least that's kind of fun sometimes. Sometimes not.
Yeah. And speaking of fun, I enjoyed Unpactually, the first game show that you hosted.
Thanks. I did too.
Appreciate it.
That was a lot of fun.
It was fun to do.
It sounded like you guys had fun. Yeah.
My favorite part of that was Justice getting tripped up on the random special teamer in the Super Bowl, which
yes,
was kind of part of the reason it was in there. But I still can't believe we almost lost a Super Bowl because we had a random special teamer make a special teams penalty, like a guy I've never heard of. So
yeah, it seems on brand for the Packers, following the next 10 years. So yeah. Go listen to that if you haven't already. Definitely a fun little experiment Paul did on the bye week there as well. And while we're talking about ways to support us, go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else. Give us a 5-star review. And while you're there, hit that subscribe or follow button to make sure you don't miss an episode. So as I mentioned, been about like 10 days, maybe a week or two since we've done this. So some news items to kind of check off our list here. The biggest one, Brandon Woodruff. Got that second opinion, and it's not a very good one. He's going to end up missing most, if not all, of 2024 after having surgery on that anterior capsule of his right shoulder. So, obviously, shoulder injury is scary to begin with. Kind of a bad Brewer history there to begin with, but beyond the obvious feelings of, like frustration and just feeling bad for Woodruff personally, because he seems like a good dude. This leaves a big hole for the Brewers heading into next year and kind of makes some tough decisions, possibly even tougher. So let's just start first. He's a free agent after next year. So do they non-tender him? Do they offer him some sort of multi-year extension, kind of a pillow contract to say, hey, we'll take care of you next year if you give away a year of free agency? I guess, Paul, how do you see this playing out with Woodruff?
It probably depends a lot on those medicals, and shoulders are just so tough. And the Brewers are so cautious with their spending on things like this. It's one thing to give a cheap contract to spaghetti against the wall. It's another thing to give somewhat big money to something that they may know is not going to work out that well. So I suspect he's kind of done as a Brewer. That's where I'd put my money. But there's also probably some opportunity to bring him back for less than you would normally pay if they think it's going to work out, which I kind of hope is what happens. But shoulders, I kind of just in my brain kind of write off shoulders as you're kind of done. And so I think that's where I'd lean, is that I think he's probably kind of done, and he probably will not be back.
Yeah, this one's really, really hard because, as you said, Paul, right up front, we don't know the medical, like the detail on that, so it's really hard to speculate about that. But that's my instinct also, is to say when it's a shoulder, like, expect nothing. Anything you get after that point, you almost have to just take as gravy, because once you have like a serious surgery in the shoulder, and there's all kinds of different ones. Like this was the anterior capsule, which I don't really know anything about, but once you start digging into that area, it opens up like a Pandora's box, because it's such a complicated joint. Like the elbow is, pretty simple and straightforward. The thing that breaks is the UCL, and when it breaks, you go get Tommy John surgery, and you could have a couple of them. You could even have, there have been guys who have pitched in the big leagues after having 3 of them.
Yeah.
But with shoulders, it's so much more up in the air, and so often this is just sort of a permanent sign that the guy is never again close to what they were before. Whereas like with Tommy John, most guys, like I think it's like close to 90% of guys come completely back from those. So yeah, you just really don't know. And there's also, a lot of this is going to depend on Woodruff too. What does he want to do? It may be that he really likes the Brewers medical training staff. If he's really comfortable with them and wants to do his rehab with the Brewers, then I could see something like a deal where the Brewers basically pay for his next year at a reduced rate, so that he can do his rehab with them, and then they get a reduction on 2025, or maybe option years beyond that, something like that, where they pay a guaranteed amount that's less than what he would make in arbitration, which what was the estimates on that have to be up close to like 15, like between 10 and 15, because he made 10 last year.
Yeah.
So
I think it was close to 15 for him. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you'd be talking about a significant reduction on that for 2024, maybe in the $2 to $5 million range or something, as a means to then get like optionality on him later. If that's something he wants to do, then that's the kind of deal I could see happening. But it is just really tough, because this is like the perfectly bad timing for this. This is the worst timing for the Brewers, for him, for everybody. Like this is the worst. I guess the very worst for him would be going right into free agency. Like that would be the very, very worst, because he would have gotten so close, right?
Yeah. If you want to read something highly intelligent on the subject of this specific injury, there's a good post on Fangraphs from when Julio Urias had this exact same thing by Mike Son. If you Google anterior shoulder capsule Fangraphs, it'll pop right up. And Julio Urias did come back to be super effective. The big problem and the big difference is he had this injury when he was 20 years old, and he still missed a season, and it took him quite a while to kind of ramp up as part of the natural prospect development process, but also coming back from the injury. Woodruff's 30. Like, a 30-year-old having this is a lot different than a 20-year-old having this. And, at 30, you're already in the range of any random injury can finish you off at any given moment. And so he's probably not pitching again until he's 32 at 30, 31, 30, no, 32, I think, at the earliest. And that's getting up there. So I don't know. This is just tough.
Yeah, he doesn't have a ton of mileage on his arm compared to, say, guys of past eras. So you could say that maybe from that perspective, like he's got less of, wear and tear than, because he's also missed time with other things, that weird Raynaud syndrome, like other various like oblique issues. I think his J.R. Kurt were talking about this on the Microbrews, that his major league debut got pushed back because he pulled something in warm-ups. So
yep.
So there's lots of different things there. The thing about Urias, and that actually does, I remember now that came up, that does make me feel a little bit better, because at least there is like a proof of concept here that like this happened. But I also remember people talking that this is like what did in Rich Harden and all of that. But that was also how long ago compared to this? I mean, medical science is improving all the time on things like this. So how relevant is, Rich Harden having this issue in the mid-aughts versus Urias having it, in 2019, 2018?
2017.
2017, yeah. I do remember when it happened then, the diagnosis was he may not just miss next year, he may miss 2 years. And he actually didn't. He was back and pitching, I think, within like 18 months. So he missed like one full season and then was back and was pitching. But that is at least a little bit of positivity to take from this, is that there is like, we do know that somebody has come back from something that is largely similar to this. So, and been very successful. So if you want to hold on to some hope, you can hold on to that hope, though the age thing does make it harder, obviously.
Yeah, just looking it up just to be sure now. Woodruff turns 31 in February. So Paul's right. By the time he's pitching again, he'll be 32, maybe even close to 33, which, yeah. Oof. And then MLB trade rumors had his arbitration projected at about 11.6 million. Okay. So a little bit lower than 15, but still would be a significant kind of roll of the dice for the Brewers there if they were to go that route. All right, let's move right along. Jay Google has our first Patreon question this week, dealing with Brandon Woodruff and some of those tough decisions that we talked about. So Jay's question here is asking, with Woodruff out for the year, do you move Burns? And if they did move him, what's the rotation look like next year? Freddie, Ashby, Gosser. So, Ryan, there's some talk after this first broke. Does this make it, more likely that Burns gets traded, less likely because you kind of need somebody just to pitch? I guess, what's your feeling on what this injury means for those ideas?
Okay, so starting with your question, then we'll get to Jay's. I think it does make it less likely that Burns gets moved than it was before. I think it was overwhelmingly likely before. I was planning on it before. I think there's serious doubt that they do it now just because they're trying to keep up a competitive squad for 2024, and being without both Burns and Woodruff. I mean, they can do it. It wouldn't be the killer. I was looking it up the other day. Between the two of them, we're talking about guys who produced less than 5 Fangraphs WAR for this year. That's a thing you have to overcome. That would be something, if you don't have Woodruff and you don't have Burns, that is definitely a thing to overcome, but it's not like an insurmountable climb. They didn't get that much from Woodruff this year. What he did was very good, but they only got 11 starts out of him. So I think that it is possible to do it, but I do think it makes it less likely that they're going to do it, because they're just trying to maintain this year to year to year thing that they're doing. But I still also could see it happening. I just think that before it was overwhelmingly likely. Now it's much murkier for me. But to Jay's actual question, what do you think the rotation looks like without Burns? Yeah, I mean, that's a starting point that he brings up there, and that for sure. So he mentions Freddie, Ashby, Gosser. We still don't know what Aaron Ashby. He's also coming off of a shoulder, and he wasn't he was not responding well right away in the summer. Like, they took a look at him and said, no, you're not ready yet. Whether that means anything come springtime, like, did he just need more time? Was he just not fully back yet? Or are we looking at a permanent reduction here? That's impossible to say. But I think you can count on Adrian Hauser being back. That's, he's in his last year of arbitration. You have the estimates up. It's got to be like under 4 million, right? Or around 4 million for. I
just lost it, but I think it was like 5-ish when I was looking at possible non-tenders. Okay. So yeah, it's around 5 again.
And I think that's an easy pickup for Adrian Hauser. Like, that's not an issue. We did find out that Colin Ray is a free agent per the terms, even though he doesn't have the service time, per the terms of his contract. Colin Ray is a free agent. When the Brewers signed him to come back from Japan, or I can't remember if he was in Japan or Korea, but when they signed that contract, he got the right to become a free agent after this year. I think that the Brewers will have a lot of interest in bringing him back as a bridge guy. We'll see what the market on that actually looks like. You could see Julio Teheran, I think, come back on something of a low-cost deal to sort of provide a bridge to these young pitchers that they have, like Gosser. Mizorowski at some point this year, maybe, if he's healthy. His elbow was barking at the end of the year, so there's that. And then Carlos F. Rodriguez is James Anderson keeps calling him the most underrated pitching prospect in the minors. I think we could see him, though he's really young, and he just had gotten to AAA at the very end of the season. So I think what you're looking at here, well, there's also the Wade Miley of it all, right? There's also that situation. Does he come back as well? Because they have a mutual option. Those generally don't get picked up. But this is that weird situation where I think you could see Wade Miley say, yeah, I'll pick up my end of it. Right.
When a guy like Burns goes, or not Burns, when a guy like Woodruff goes down and changes kind of the opportunity that's available for someone like Wade Miley, like now you're, possibly getting paid a good chunk and have a starting spot guaranteed and all that good stuff. And not that he wouldn't make the rotation anyway, but the Brewers are, have a lot of people who could potentially crack that Ryan just rattled off. But I think that's possible. But more than anything, I think this brings guys like Miley back into the fold. And if it ends up looking like Freddie, Ashby, Gosser, and they still move Burns, and then you get a couple of Julius Chassin, Wade Miley, Brewer reclamation project types, that's probably where I'd put my money in terms of the opening day starting rotation, because they do it so frequently. And I think that they're frankly kind of cocky about it. Like, I think Teheran is that as well, and so that's what I think it will be with, guys getting called up as the season goes on for injury reasons and because of promotion reasons. But I think you'll have a couple of journeymen and a weaker top than we're used to having.
Yeah, and there is actually sort of a weird depth of starting pitching. The top end of this starting pitching market took a big hit with the twin Shohei Ohtani going down with injury and Julio Urias probably not pitching again for a very long time. So the top end of the market looks sketchy there. But there's some depth in this market, and there's some guys that you could potentially see, like, would the Brewers bring in, say, a guy like Rich Hill to just try to give them innings? Sure, that seems. Michael Lorenzen is out there. You have Frankie Montas as a reclamation project type guy that I don't know what his health status is at the moment, but he is a free agent after this year. Hyunjin Ryu is a guy who's out there. There's a bunch of guys. Luke Weaver, Alex Wood is a free agent. Like, there's a number of interesting sorts of guys, and then some guys who potentially might get their options not picked up. Martin Perez is maybe interesting. James Paxton is out there. So, like, there are guys who are potentially available out there, and the Brewers will go to the slot bucket here to get guys. Like, they will do that. That's what they do. And frankly, given their track record, that's what they should do. And you could cobble together a pretty interesting rotation, which they did in 2018. Yeah, like, they cobbled together a pretty interesting rotation. You come back with Freddie Peralta, that's instantly better than anybody you had coming into 2018 by far. So, like, you can do some things here, but we'll have to see what they decide to do with Burns. It's going to be an interesting winter from every perspective, but particularly that one.
Yeah. Continuing my role as the fact checker, 5.6 million was the projection for Hauser. So a little bit more than 5, but okay. Probably not prohibitive there.
No, something you absolutely pick up, considering all the other salary that's not going to be there now because of this Woodruff situation. So.
Right. And as you were saying, if you're trying to replicate this year's staff, all you need to do is cobble together 5 WAR, and any combination of the onslaught of names you just let out probably can get you there at some points. All right, let's shift gears now, because Craig Counsell still, for the moment, manager for the Brewers for at least the next 10 days or so. He can start talking to other teams at the end of October. And it sounds like, the Mets stuff still pretty much out there. A lot of people expecting him to at least take the interview with the Mets, at least if you read John Heyman, which I guess I don't know why he wouldn't. So we're still kind of in a holding pattern, waiting to see what happens. And I think to some extent, he's kind of holding up the entire managing market. We haven't really seen a lot of hires made after, the end of season bloodletting there. So, there's been some stuff saying that, maybe Counsell wants to stay as long as he gets paid what he thinks he's worth, which, would be like the Bruce Bochy level at this point.
And that is around 6 million, between like 6 and 7 million. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. But then you have Heyman saying like the Mets might even have a cap. Like they probably won't go up to 8 to get him, but they could, create a bidding war with the Brewers if they wanted to do that. So I guess right now, Paul, given all that stuff, where do you think things stand in terms of the chances that he comes back? I know we've talked about this ad nauseum, but now we're, in the last week or so of this. And given all that, what do you think?
I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that he's going, but I would have the Mets as a prohibitive favorite just because I think they will open the checkbook for him. And so I'd make them like an 80-20 prohibitive favorite. So I think he does end up there. That just a guess. Nobody knows what Craig's thinking but Craig. But I feel like they really want him. I feel like it's kind of a natural fit with how they've gone about their offseason. And he looks like he needs a new place to me. So from reading his facial expressions and whatnot. So that'd be my guess. But if the Brewers pony up money, he very well might stick around.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty likely at this point because it's just not that much money. He was already making $3.5 million. You have to assume that they were already willing to go, solidly above that, even without whatever leverage play this might be on Counsell's part. So if it is money, I've been saying this the last couple of weeks on Twitter, that if it's money, I think this gets done. I think that my fear it would be that he wants to leave to go someplace else and do something different. But if he leaves to go to the Mets, he's not really doing something different. He's working with David Stearns, which he's done before. So like that isn't even it would be the New York market, so it'd be different in that way. But like it's not a complete, change to the dark side of the moon or something. Like this is still well within like what he's kind of comfortable with in terms of working with David Stearns. My biggest thing here though is I'm looking at it right now. So John Heyman was reporting that the Mets have a reasonable chance, quote, a reasonable chance of getting Counsell. Compared to what they were talking about with David Stearns for the last 2 years, where it was like, he's their guy, they're going to get him.
Right.
I'm going to take John Heyman and his sourcing on this because like that he doesn't think it's going to happen. Like he's not saying it won't happen, but he definitely doesn't think this is like some sort of lock thing that it's going to happen. So, and he also was the one who reported the quote about somebody from the Brewers saying they think that they can keep him as long as he gets paid what he believes is fair.
Right.
So, and we're just not talking about that much money here. Like you're talking about like basically, one dart throw of a slot bucket starter. Like it's just not that much.
Yeah.
So if this really just is about money, I maintain that it gets done. And so I feel much better at this point that it's going to happen. I wish that it was done because right now Counsell could sign an extension with the Brewers. Like he can't talk to other teams, but he could talk to the Brewers. I wonder if he's just waiting for like the Mets' best offer to hit the table once it does and to turn around to Mark and say, okay, what are you going to do? Sure. I guess that's what I'm hoping is the situation here. But yeah, I think that it does get done because it would be so strange. I saw did you see the picture that was floating around of him from like 1982 as like, a 10-year-old or whatever, sitting there with, the team. Like, sure. I mean, he has the Brewers in his blood. Like, this isn't just sometimes when people talk about him in the national media sphere, they're like, he's a Midwest guy. No, he's not a Midwest guy. He's a Milwaukee guy.
Right.
And beyond that, he's not a Milwaukee guy. He grew up with the Milwaukee Brewers, like literally hanging out on the field with the players. Like the Brewers are very much in his DNA. And I think that when the rubber meets the road, when it comes time for him to actually make the decision, he's going to have a hard time walking away from that.
All right. Next Patreon question comes from Dan Ventura, and it's raising something I guess I hadn't considered before, but could make some sense. Asking, do you think Counsell could be eyeballing a GM job? I haven't heard this discussed much, and when I thought of the possibility, some peculiarities of his lame duck season made more sense. So, it wouldn't be unprecedented. There's been, guys who have gone back and forth between the dugout and the front office before. Counsell obviously had that as his start or his introduction to his post-playing career. There's rumors that Gabe Kapler, after getting fired, might be looking at a front office job too. So I guess, Paul, is that something to consider about his future too?
I feel like it's possible, but just highly speculative. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. And we don't have any evidence for it other than just a general sense that he may be sick of the day in, day out of managing and appearing in front of the press.
But let me tell you, as a GM, that gets way, maybe not the press part of it, but in terms of the day in, day out, being a GM, at least with a manager, you get the off season where things are pretty low key. As the GM, your off season gets even busier than like what the regular season is like sometimes.
Yeah, but it is a different kind of busyness.
Sure.
Completely. And the pressures, the day-to-day pressure of like actually having to explain yourself and be the face of the organization, I can see being a different kind of grind on a lot of people. Mm-hmm. That's really it. So no, but I mean, we don't know. I assume everybody looks at every opportunity because that's what you should do. But I think he's going to still be a manager.
I do too. I think that if he wanted to go this direction, he would have gone this direction. At the time he took the managerial job, instead he would have, taken that fork in the road at that point. I think it is possible, especially maybe later. I don't know. I think the days of like, was a trader Jack McKeon bouncing back and forth between being a GM and
that's
a
field
manager.
Struggling to think of. Yeah.
Like that, those days are gone. Just because, it's such an all-consuming gig now to be the Pobo or the GM or whatever. But I mean, I could see him going back to the front office at some point in a role other than GM, like a lesser role, a consulting role, something like that. That seems more likely to me than him actually becoming like the head decision maker for an organization. And I think at this point he would probably have to do that. I don't think he would just fall into like that top dog role. He would have to go and like prove that that's a thing that he like can and wants to do before somebody just gives it to him. Though maybe that's wrong too. I don't know. But I think he probably stays as a manager. I think that he could have been a GM. I think that was something that if he had wanted to go that direction, he definitely, I think, could have done it. I think it's maybe a little bit late for that now.
All right, moving on. The last big topic we wanted to get to before we get to the rest of the questions is the pending Brewers Stadium deal. So it looks like it'll actually get done, which, I was pretty optimistic that it was going to get it done no matter what. Mm-hmm. Just too much at stake there. Cheaper to keep them, yada, yada, all that stuff. So the assembly had a vote in the past week or two here that passed with some surprising bipartisan support. I guess not surprising in the sense that, some Dems signed on to the Republican proposal, but just the interesting split between red and blue within, even like Milwaukee and Madison. those legislators kind of split based on, how they feel about public funding for stadiums in general. But anyway, the deal that passed the assembly calls for about $411 million from the state, $135 million split between the city and county in Milwaukee, and $100 million from the Brewers over the next 27 years, basically extending the team's lease with the stadium district through 2050. Obviously still needs to pass the Senate, and probably some changes there just to kind of placate some members of that caucus. But as noted by the Assembly and Republicans there, this is something that the governor supports, Milwaukee County executive supports, mayor supports. All of those are Democrats, and this was a Republican-authored proposal. So when you have these rare instances of bipartisanship in Wisconsin, it'll get done. So and probably pretty quickly. So I guess just overall, in as succinctly as possible, so we don't spend an hour talking about this. Paul, I guess, what are your thoughts about the deal?
It's not surprising it's going to get done. Politicians love their sort of hive minds of Republicans not funding things and Democrats doing public works projects, but everybody gets together on stadium because everybody likes funding circuses. It is what politicians do best. And so it is like all stadium deals, not a great deal for anybody except the ownership of the Brewers, but that is how stadiums work across the country. And so here we are.
Yeah, this will instantly, to your point, make the Brewers a more valuable franchise. As soon as this gets passed, you will see Forbes estimates of the franchise value skyrocket, because this is set revenue that they're going to have. Well, not revenue, but set money that's going to be spent on them over the next, 27 years. It's how this works, because it is set up that we're going to be paying a little bit here, there, and everywhere for the next 27 years. So yeah, it was interesting because usually, so it seems common that you get bills that have like bipartisan support where you get like one party completely behind it and the other party, some people will jump on, and then
right.
Like this was a weird one in that there were significant amounts of both Republicans and Democrats who were for and against.
Truly
bill.
Bipartisan. Yes.
Yeah, truly
really true.
Bipartisan support and bipartisan opposition, which that part, like, I can't remember that happening very often at all. That is a kind of a weird one and an interesting indicator of the politics of this are weird, even if you're totally right. Like, this is the standard I've been saying since it began, that I thought this was going to get done, and I thought it was going to get done relatively soon. And I think I even said when we originally talked about it, I think it'll get done by like this fall. So you knew it was going to happen. It was just a matter of everybody getting the deal that they wanted to be able to take back to their constituents. And I'm totally on board with the idea. The ticket surcharge for events, that's how more of it should be funded than less. Like that should be because that's the thing that the JS is reporting that LeMahieu, the head of the Senate, wants, and that like people in that caucus want. They want a ticket surcharge to actually charge some of this to people attending events, and that's where a lot of the money should come from. If you are going to do public funding like that, it should come directly from people that actually use the thing as much as possible. So that part of it seems fine. But yeah, ultimately this is public financing of stadiums is not the standard worldwide, but it's the standard in North America. It happens almost all of the time, and it's frustrating. But if you want to keep your team, it's basically something that you're expected to do in almost every case. And even in places like Chicago, the Cubs were never moving anywhere. They rattled their sabers a little bit about moving out to the burbs, but everybody knew that was never going to happen. And they still got a big chunk of public money for their Wrigley Field renovations a few years ago. So it's just the way that things work, and it's really frustrating. But it's also, like I said, it's the standard operating procedure at this point, and as much as it stinks, that's the standard. The other thing that I particularly don't like about this is the fact that you do have a big chunk of this coming from the state, which I think is fine. That's appropriate. There's a huge surplus, whatever. They could do worse things with it, so whatever. But the $135 million from the state and county, from the city and county, that's going to be evenly split between those two entities. Remember, when this was originally conceived, it was as a 5-county project, including the WOW counties, and I believe Racine was the 5th county, along with Milwaukee. And all those suburban counties are now off the hook, and they don't have to pay anything from their budgets. They don't have to scrape up any of this money. It has to come exclusively from the city and county of Milwaukee. And yes, the stadium is in Milwaukee County, but that particularly sticks in my craw because a lot of the usage of the stadium, not just for Brewers games, but for concerts and whatever, a lot of that is people coming from the WOW counties into the city for this. And I think that the burden should be spread more over those groups as well. But politically,
you can hit a golf ball to Waukesha County from County Stadium or from Miller Park or from AmFam Field or whatever they're called.
Yeah, exactly. It's right there. And a big part of why the stadium is where it's at is its proximity to the suburbs so that suburbanites could easily access it. That was a big reason why it's where it's at instead of being, say, down on the lakefront or
if it's going to be funded this way, it should be downtown. And
That's the other thing about this. But once they built this giant thing, it was going to stay there for a long time. I never harbored any delusions that they could actually tear it down and rebuild downtown. You think that this is expensive? Building a new stadium downtown, you would be talking in the billions. Like, no question that would begin. You're starting with a, God, what is that? At least 10 digits. Yeah, you're starting with 10 digits. So, yeah.
All right. We do have a holdover Patreon question about the stadium stuff that we kind of saved to talk about for another time, and we'll get to it now. So Corey Diedrich asked a little while ago, can you explain a little bit more clearly what's going on with the funding in the AmFam Field parking? Are they eventually going to put up bars and restaurants around the area instead of all the parking? Also, thanks to you guys so much for doing this podcast. You do a tremendous job. So, that was part of the negotiations too, Ryan, right? Like, can the city kind of pry off a piece of those far-flung lots that aren't really getting used all that much and develop that?
Yeah, I read through all the stuff. This is definitely being discussed, and it's been something I know that it was pointed out to us on Twitter by a listener that this was something that the mayor of Milwaukee, Cavalier Johnson, was interested in doing, creating something like this in that area to start developing it up. And I don't know where that actually stands right now. We expressed, when we talked about this a few podcasts ago, we expressed some skepticism on the idea that, like, any stadium district that would be created like that would almost certainly redound to the Brewers' great benefit more so than the community's benefit. Like, they would get control of those things, and it would just be more income for the Brewers. So I'm sure they would like to do it, but there's also, it's a complicated issue.
They don't seem like they do want to do it. That's the confusing thing about it. Like, they're not gung-ho about that at all.
Yeah, they're not pushing for it, and or at least publicly pushing for it, which, yeah, that was weird that they weren't publicly pushing for that. Maybe because they know that they wouldn't get that it would go to the city. Maybe I'm not sure exactly why they're not pushing it, because everybody else is pushing for that.
Even
right?
if they don't. Well, I don't think that's the case, though, is it? You get a lot of pushback from suburban ninnies about the tailgating culture and some pushback on taking away parking. There is definitely some of that there. And first of all, the Brewers should still want this to happen, even if it doesn't go to them directly, because it's another reason for people to go to the area. And, even if they don't have every restaurant and bar and, beer district thing under their ownership, they still can open stuff in the stadium or tangential to it that the people who are drawn to that can go to, and they can still make money off that. I don't understand why there's any opposition to that, especially since, as I always say, it's a Scooby-Doo ghost town there. Like, it's not good right now. Any development that happens to the empty warehouses and garbage around the park is better than nothing happening to it. So they should do that, but nobody seems to want to do it.
Yeah, that it is. You're right. That's very strange, because Schlesinger's statement about it, I can't find it, but he was saying basically that, like, they want to help protect the tailgating culture, which sounded like, but that sounded like a PR move. Like, our fans will want to hear us say that sort of thing, because it
might be a PR move, but it's backed by the action of not doing anything.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, though, that if maybe there is something in here that ends up happening out of this. I could see there being something coming on that front. It doesn't necessarily have to be part of this plan. They can potentially do that separately. We'll see what happens on that front. But yeah, those parking lots do not ever fill up completely, like, ever. They don't fill completely. And there are other, ways of doing things here. It would help if Milwaukee had, more robust public transit to get people to the stadium in large numbers. That would help a lot. Currently, it's not great. Like, the city buses, there's some city bus lines that run down there. But other than that, there's not much. But it's...
There's the shuttles.
But that's not public. That's private.
Right.
So though the Brewers do support that, that's something they have worked out as an agreement with the people that run the shuttles. But that's also part of the economic picture of this, is like, the bars on Blue Mound all rely on income from events at that stadium, mostly Brewers games, to get their to fund them for the year. Like, it's a big part of their annual budget, I'm sure. So all those places rely on that business. There's one other thing we should probably mention here is that part of this plan is to winterize the stadium, right? So that it can be used year round, as opposed to basically being, it's pretty hard to do anything in there November through like February, because it's just too cold and they don't really have the capacity to handle that. So we'll see if that actually does mean that they're going to bring in more events year round. The problem is that a stadium that size, there's only a certain number of national touring acts who can do that. And a lot of them that do stadium tours don't do them in the dead of winter anyway. When they do them, they're out in the summer because they can then be in indoor and outdoor venues. So, or at least, in the north, like they can do it that way. So I don't know how realistic we're actually going to see like a big uptick in concerts, especially like coming in the winter. I think that's probably not actually going to happen.
Yeah, Taylor Swift's not playing AmFam in February. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think she's playing AmFam, period. Isn't she mostly in football stadiums? Like baseball stadiums.
Yeah. 45,000 is too small. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Since we have a kind of a hard out for a couple of us here, we've got some other Patreon questions to get to. We can get to these kind of quickly. So Lucroy Suitcase is asking, if the Diamondbacks win the NLCS, they would keep the streak alive of teams making the World Series after beating the Brewers in the playoffs. How many times would it take for it to become an interesting factoid? So after Game 5, I'm becoming less optimistic this will be the case. But Paul, how many more times would it need to happen before like national media would pick up on it? Do you think?
I think it's already kind of an interesting factoid, but I think like you get like 2 or 3 more, and it starts to become the Brewers' identity nationally. Yeah. I think
the Brewers bump in the playoffs. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I think like 3 more, and then it's like the Brewers are the harbinger of the World Series winner. But right now, it's just a weird coincidence still. But we're getting there.
Yeah, because it is. Everybody has made the World Series. Who's beaten the Brewers in the playoffs? Period. Right? What happened in '81? Who did they get beat by in '81?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I was 4.
But I mean, obviously, '82 they lost the World Series. 2008, the Phillies won it. 2011, the Cardinals won it. 2018, the Dodgers lost to the Red Sox. That's the one where it actually that was just make the World Series as opposed to win the World Series. But then 19, the Nats won it. 20, the Dodgers won it. 21, the Braves won it. Like they've established themselves as quite a stepping stone to a World Series title, which that is pretty frustrating.
Yep.
Another playoff question from Bill Rabe asking, playoff formats. I like the 3-5-7 setup, or would you go 7-7-7 like the NBA and never have any upsets? So, Paul, plenty of discourse about the playoff format, especially once the Braves and Dodgers left. How do you like it?
The 3 sucks. I would just get rid of that any way that I possibly could. I like longer series, and I would actually go 7-7-7 if I had my druthers. I get why they don't. It takes a long, long time to do that with how many playoff teams they have. I would, of course, have fewer of them if I ran things, and I don't. But that 3 is ridiculous. Like, they got to lose that. It's stupid. It's too random. Like, at least 5 is something. At least it has everybody make a depth decision at some point. So, I do not like this at all, and they should get rid of it.
The problem is, as long as you have a bye, they're not going to want to make it longer than it. People are already complaining that the bye layoff, for the layoff from a 3-game series is too long for those poor teams that advance to have to sit through because they get all cold, and that's been the outcome. That's really just, we have 2 years worth of sample here, and that's people are complaining because of the outcomes they've seen at this point more than anything.
Yep.
But I want to just push back against the idea that like never having any upsets in a 7-game series. That's not true, because you'll get upsets in no matter what length of baseball series you have, because it's baseball, and baseball just breeds upsets in even a 7-game series. You're going to have things happen where the team that is clearly not better wins the series just because that's how it shakes out. So I think a lot of this is just like the inherent randomness of baseball as a sport. No matter what you do with the playoffs, you're going to end up with a lot of randomness just because that's how it works. So I don't like the 3-game series either, Paul. I think it's kind of silly, but given what they want to do with this having a bye thing, and there are good things about the bye situation, I think you're kind of stuck with it, even if it sucks.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned 2-year sample, but in the first 2 years of this, only one series period has gone more than the full 3 games too. So like it's just a sweep fest. So that's kind of boring too.
Well, and the other thing about the way the playoffs work now, it used to be that they didn't have like set dates, but because of TV now, everybody wants set dates. So the World Series, you could have looked back in August. The World Series was going to start on this date. This was like they have the dates planned out. So if there is like if all the series wrap early, which it looked for a moment like that was going to happen with the ALCS and NLCS, there could have potentially been a big layoff. Well, now those series are going deeper, so we're not going to have as big a layoff as we would have. But we would have had a long layoff just because that's how they schedule things now.
Sure. Michael McNamara, next question. Cheer me up, Ryan, and propose a realistic Orioles-Corbin Burnes trade.
So Red Venture on Twitter has really talked me into the idea that the Brewers can potentially get more than I've been thinking for Corbin Burnes in terms of prospects. I thought it was going to be a very low return deal. I've nudged that expectation up, and he's mostly talking about like the fact that Lucas Giolito brought back a legitimate top 50 prospect for a 2-month rental of a guy who's nowhere near Corbin Burnes' stature. Okay, I see your point. And what he brought up, I'm just going to crib right off of him. He brought up Kobe Mayo plus as a deal that potentially could go with the Orioles. Kobe Mayo is a third baseman / first baseman. Really, he's going to be a first baseman, guys. But with a ton of power, really, really big power hitter. And he's already in AAA at this point, only 21 years old. He is a guy that would fit very well with like the Brewers' need for power at this point. So Kobe Mayo plus some other guys of value. If you want to like dream on a deal, Red Venture, I'm going to follow his lead and say, let's go that way. The Kobe Mayo deal.
All right, Price Trozen asking, is there an under-the-radar interesting bat out there for the Brewers to take a flyer on? So, Paul, you like your spaghetti. Any spaghetti look appealing to you?
It's kind of rough. I always kind of like CJ Cron. I think he's a free agent again. But, like, it's not a great class of underrated people. I was trying to look at people's platoon splits, and I can't even find somebody there that's super interesting.
How about reverse platoon splits?
Yeah, I mean, that's how we can tell who they are going to sign, not who they should sign.
I'm going to go with the guy that I was just doing a search of like who hit home runs who could potentially get traded because it's kind of rough on the free agent market. This wouldn't be under the radar at all, but I did bring up Matt Chapman as a guy. I think he's going to get close to $100 million. But if the Brewers wanted to go for a guy, he's only 30. And if you wanted to like go for a guy who has a defensive floor to work with, Matt Chapman is he's a very, very good defender. And if you gave him like 5 years, 90 million, 4 years, 80, something in that sort of neighborhood, I think you might be able to get that done. And that could then be, I think it would make a lot of people happy for a lot of reasons. It would improve the power. It would keep the defense where it's at, and it would be spending money, which is something, people really, really want to see. So like all of those things would be good. He sort of fits nicely into that spot that is now vacant from the Lorenzo Cain contract, right?
Yeah, that's true. I feel like a lot of the options are kind of boring ones we talked about a lot, like at the trade deadline. Like Hunter Renfroe is one of the best outfielders available, and like Teoscar Hernandez is one of the best outfielders available. And we didn't get him, but we talked about trading for him. And it's just there's not a lot of like big, huge names out there. One guy I like, but is now too old and not good anymore, is G-Man, and I always wish we would have kept him, but I think he's like 34 or something now, and I think he might be washed. But
yeah, sorry, I distracted myself with the Matt Chapman thing because he is a free agent. The guy I was thinking about for trading, Matt Chapman is a free agent. He'll probably get one of the top signing of the winter.
He looks like one of the best non-Shohei guys out there that you could go after.
Yeah, he does. So it probably not a thing the Brewers are actually going to do, but maybe if the market is a little bit soft this winter, maybe you could see that happen. We'll see how the market, I think, would largely determine that. Like he would need to be sort of still out there in January, and that's less common these days. So, but as far as trading for a guy, Brent Rooker is very interesting to me. He had 30 home runs this year. He got off to a big start and then kind of faded down the stretch. But if you want your 3 true outcomes, Paul, let me introduce you to Brent Rooker. He definitely has that. Put up a 130 OPS plus this year. And I guess he did hit 246. It was just really in the second half that his batting average tumbled. But 246, 329, 488, playing for Oakland. So the problem here is that, like, where are you going to play him? He's an outfielder, kind of, but really more of a DH. And you really want to lock that in with all of the outfielders that we have and Christian Yelich out there. I don't know, but he's an interesting one. Is some right-handed power to inject into the lineup. I could see it. And he's still not arbitration eligible until after this next year. So you'd get him on a league minimum contract. I don't know. They'd ask for a lot.
They probably would. Yeah. Yep. All right. JD, next question on Patreon. Wild Bill Contreras just sent a Zeet with only the eyeballs emoji. Best guess at what that means. Extension for him, or Counsell confirmed he's coming back with a new contract, or something else. So I love vague tweet or X posts or Zeet season, Paul. How about you?
He's just trying not to be a wide receiver. That's what he's doing.
Yes. I love that meme so much. Yeah.
Yep. I don't even have a guess. There's no reason to guess. It could have been anything. Like, could be Brewer related. Could just be like his niece like did well in a sport somewhere or something, that people have lives outside of their occupation. So no idea, read nothing into it. The eyeball emoji is there just to get cheap engagement. You should ignore it.
Yep.
Okay. And last Patreon question this week, a fun one from Morgoth 10 asking, in honor of the new Blink-182 slapping pretty hard, which Brewer had the most slap-worthy walk-up music of all time? Interpret slap-worthy as you see fit. LaCroix Suitcase with a suggestion here in a comment. When Prince Fielder just used the THX sound.
I love that so much.
That was good. Good.
Also, the truck backing up sound that he did, that was also great. I enjoyed that thoroughly.
Prince had a few good ones too. Yeah. There was also the time he walked up to Money by ZZ Top after basically declining an undermarket extension offer. So that was fun. Paul, any good ones come to mind for you?
Yeah, George Kataris used Sober by Tool. And that is the actual answer to this question. So if you want to go specific to personality, I always did enjoy Zach Greinke using Boulevard of Broken Dreams, which starts with I Walk Alone, which is very Zach Greinke. So like that for appropriateness, but for slapping, Tool is a good answer.
I'm going to go with the Chad Moeller walk-up song, which was the Grateful Dead classic Shakedown Street, which has a very sort of heavy bass line and just, a very Disco Dead era from like 1978, 79. So, that one always stood out to me. Was always happy when he came. Me and Steve were the only happy people in the stadium when he came to back, because we're like, yeah, we can hear Shakedown Street. So we were the ones. We were the ones who were happy with that.
Awesome. I don't know if it slaps, but I just always love audience participation. So anything that gets the crowd singing, I think that's why the Phillies are fun, because like half the bank sings like half the guys' walk-up songs, which is great. Who had Mr. Jones? Was that Kotsay or was that New and White? I forget who had Mr. Jones by the Counting Crows.
I do not know.
I think it was Kotsay. That was always a fun one.
Frank Catalanato came up to the outfield, which now like every team kind of has a guy who does that every few years. We heard somebody when we were on the road, somebody was coming up to it. Maybe it was on the Rockies. Somebody came. Oh, it's Charlie Blackmon, I think, comes up to the outfield because you get everybody singing along with it. That's
that tracks. All right. That'll do it for questions this week. Thanks everybody who sent one in. A reminder, when you sign up to become a new patron, you also get a shout out here on this podcast. So Ryan, who do we have joining us in the last couple of weeks here?
So did we already talk about Matt Pickett? Was he the guy from 3 weeks ago? No, maybe he was
one of your pet guest hosts, Paul, right?
Matt runs Hey We Like Your Pod podcast, and he was a guest host on Reporting as Eligible 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And he does like our pod. So
all right. Good. Oh, okay. He actually said, because we speculated whether or not he actually listened or just, okay.
He listens. He is a devoted listener. He listens all the time. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. And then we have Paul's cousin, Matthew. Matthew Noonan has joined the fold. So thank you, Matt. Do you know if he's more an RE guy or a tailgate guy?
He's more of an RE guy, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. And then we have Michael Marsalic, And we have Danish cheesehead.
Nice.
Danish cheese sounds fantastic right now. That seems like a tasty thing.
I feel like they do well in the World Cheese Championships.
Go for a cheese Danish.
Oh, yeah, that's true. We haven't had breakfast yet, so that sounds really good. Thanks for signing up, guys. A reminder, patreon.com/MKE tailgate, $2 a month gets you question priority. That's all it takes. $5, you get all that extra content as well. That'll do it for us this week. We will be back. I guess maybe next week. I didn't talk about this with you guys, but or when the news allows. It's off season. We might have a World Series matchup by then. We might have some resolution on the Craig Counsell news that I'm sure we'd want to talk about as well. So until then, stay well, everybody, and enjoy your week.